Instead of son, the sultan had given birth to a puppy.
I will punish her. Let a box be built for her at the door of the principal mosque, and let the window of the box be always open. There she shall sit in the coarsest clothes, and every Mussulman who enters the mosque shall spit in her face in passing. Anyone that refuses to obey shall be exposed to the same punishment himself.
Once upon a time in a faraway land, there was a young sultan named Amir, who loved nothing more than to explore his city in disguise, seeking adventures with his friend, an officer named Farid, who dressed like him. Amir had a kind heart and a spirit of adventure, and even after he became sultan, he couldn't resist the thrill of exploring the hidden corners of his kingdom. One day, shortly after becoming sultan, Amir decided to disguise himself again, this time leaving the grandeur of the palace behind. Dressed simply as a common citizen, he wandered into the lesser-known streets of the capital. As he walked down a quiet street, Amir overheard a lively conversation coming from a house. Peeking through a crack in the door, he saw 3 sisters sitting together on a sofa in a large hall. They were deep in discussion about the kind of men they wished to marry. "I wish for nothing more than to marry the Sultan's baker," exclaimed the eldest sister. "Imagine the joy of eating the delicious bread made only for the Sultan." "I would be content with marrying the Sultan's head cook," said the second sister. "I could feast on the most exquisite dishes, knowing they are prepared with the Sultan's own bread. My taste is just as good as yours, dear sister." Then it was the youngest sister's turn, the most beautiful and wisest of the 3. "As for me," she said confidently, "I dream of marrying none other than the Sultan himself." Amir was amused by their conversation and decided to fulfill their wishes. He turned to his vizier, Farid, and instructed him to note down the address. The next morning, he ordered the sisters to be brought to the palace. The vizier followed the Sultan's orders, and without giving the sisters time to change, he escorted them to the palace. There they were presented before the Sultan. "Do you remember your wishes from last night?" the Sultan asked with a smile. "Fear not, but tell me the truth." The sisters were taken aback by the question and grew silent, their cheeks turning red. The youngest sister's blush caught the Sultan's eye, and he continued, "I know each of your wishes. You," he said, addressing the youngest, "who wished to marry me, your wish shall be granted today. And you," he turned to the other 2, "shall marry my baker and head cook." The sisters were shocked and fell to their knees, trying to explain it was all a joke. But the Sultan was firm. "Your wishes will come true," he declared. So that very day, 3 weddings took place. The youngest sister's wedding was a grand affair, fitting for the Sultan's bride. However, the weddings of the baker and head cook were simple, matching their stations. The elder sisters, consumed by jealousy, could not bear the difference in their weddings. They harbored resentment and plotted revenge against the youngest sister, despite her kindness towards them. Months passed, and the youngest sister, now the Sultan's wife, was pregnant. They received the Sultan's permission to reside in the palace for a few weeks, never leaving their sister's side night or day. Eventually, when a beautiful baby boy was born, they placed him in a cradle and set it adrift in a canal within the palace grounds. Upon informing the Sultan, they deceitfully claimed that instead of the desired son, the Sultana had given birth to a puppy. The Sultan, enraged and grief-stricken, was barely held back from taking his wrath out on the Sultana by the Grand Vizier. Meanwhile, the cradle peacefully floated along the canal until it caught the attention of the intendant, a highly respected official. "Fetch that cradle for me," he instructed a nearby gardener. The gardener retrieved the cradle, revealing a baby inside that showed signs of great beauty despite its young age. Without children of his own, the intendant decided to raise the child as his own. He brought the cradle and baby home to his wife, declaring, "Though we have not been blessed with children, heaven has sent us this one in their place. Bring a nurse. I will publicly acknowledge this child as my son." His wife joyfully accepted the baby, and despite the intendant's awareness that the child likely came from the royal palace, he did not delve further into the matter. The following year, another prince was born and set adrift, but again the intendant found and adopted the child. This repeated a third time the next year, enraging the sultan even more. Finally, despite the sisters' delight, the sultan ordered the sultana's execution. However, the grand vizier and courtiers, deeply fond of the sultana, pleaded for mercy, proposing she be banished instead. The sultan, calming down, agreed to spare her life under the condition that she be subject to daily humiliation. A box was constructed for her at the mosque's entrance, its window always open. There, dressed in rags, she would sit, and every person entering the mosque was to spit at her. Anyone refusing would face the same fate. The Grand Vizier, seeing no further argument, ensured the Sultan's decree was carried out. The sisters watched with satisfaction as the box was built and the Sultana subjected to ridicule. However, her dignified and meek demeanor won the sympathy of many among the crowd. Meanwhile, the intendant and his wife lovingly raised the 3 children they had found, providing them with care and tenderness. As the children grew older, their grace and noble bearing became more pronounced. They were named Bahman and Perviz, after ancient Persian kings, while the princess was called Parizade, the child of the genie. Their foster father, the intendant, ensured they received an education befitting their true station. He hired tutors for the princes, teaching them reading and writing. The princess, eager to learn alongside her brothers, showed such dedication that she soon matched their knowledge. Their studies broadened to include fine arts, geography, poetry, history, and sciences rarely learned. They excelled in every subject, surprising their teachers with their quick progress. The princess had a special love for music, mastering various instruments and skills like riding, archery, and javelin throwing. To further enrich their lives, the intendant bought a splendid country house surrounded by a vast park filled with wild animals. Here, the princes and princess could indulge in hunting to their heart's content. When everything was settled, the intendant, feeling his age, asked the sultan for permission to retire. Graciously granted, the sultan asked what reward he desired. The intendant, loyal and humble, asked only for the sultan's continued favor, then retired from service. Months passed in peaceful enjoyment of their country life. Then tragedy struck when the intendant suddenly passed away. With his wife also gone, the children, now young adults, mourned their father deeply. They continued to live quietly in their beloved home, uninterested in the affairs of the court. One day, while the princes were out hunting, Princess Parizade remained in her chambers. During this time, an old Muslim devotee arrived and requested to pray. The princess welcomed her warmly, offering the best seat and refreshments. As they spoke, the pilgrim mentioned 3 extraordinary treasures: the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water. Intrigued, the princess asked where to find these marvels. The pilgrim explained they were all in one place, near the borders of the kingdom towards India. She instructed the princess that a messenger needed to follow the road past their house for 20 days, then ask the first person they met for these wonders. After the pilgrim left, Princess Parizade pondered the treasures. When her brothers returned, they noticed her somber mood and inquired about it. She explained what she had learned and her desire to obtain these treasures. Prince Bahman, as the elder, insisted on being the first to attempt the quest. The next morning, he set off, promising to return safely. However, as he was about to leave, Princess Parizade, fearing for his safety, gave him a knife. She told him that as long as the blade remained clean, she would know he was alive. If it ever became stained with blood, it would mean his death. Prince Bahman rode for 20 days until he reached the foot of a mountain as instructed by the dervish. There he threw a ball which led him to the mountain's peak. However, as he climbed, he heard strange voices urging him to turn back. Ignoring their warnings, fear crept into his heart, and he glanced behind him. Instantly, he turned into a black stone, just like the others scattered around the mountain. Back home, Princess Parizade and Prince Perviz were alarmed when they saw the blood on the knife. They realized with horror that something had happened to Bahman. The princess blamed herself for encouraging the quest and felt deep regret. Days turned into nights as they anxiously awaited Bahman's return. But deep down, they knew something terrible had befallen him. Prince Perviz's grief at his brother's loss was profound, yet he did not dwell in useless lamentation like his sister, Princess Parizade. Instead, he focused on action. Why should we doubt the old woman's words about these treasures? He asked. What motive would she have to deceive us? No, our brother's fate was likely due to an accident or lack of caution. Tomorrow, I will embark on the same quest. Terrified at the thought of losing her only remaining brother, the princess begged him to reconsider, but Prince Perviz remained resolute. Before departing, he gave her a chaplet of 100 pearls, saying, "Recite this daily for me while I am away. If the beads stick, it will indicate our brother's fate has befallen me. Yet let us hope for the best." Setting out on his journey, on the 20th day he encountered the dervish in the same spot where Prince Bahman had met him. He inquired about the whereabouts of the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water. As with his brother, the dervish tried to dissuade him, mentioning a similar fate to a young man resembling him who had not returned. "That was my elder brother," Prince Perviz replied. "He is now dead, though the circumstances elude me. He has transformed into a black stone, like others on this quest," the dervish revealed, warning Prince Perviz of the danger. To prevent such a fate, he instructed the prince to pay no heed to the voices on the mountain, and gave him a ball from the bag, seemingly half full. Arriving at the mountain's base, Prince Perviz began his ascent, reminded of the dervish's guidance. Yet soon after he was startled by a man's voice, drawing his sword to defend himself, only to be turned into a black stone alongside his horse. Each morning, Princess Parizade would recite her beads, and that day when the first pearl remained fixed, her heart sank. Prepared for such an outcome, she disguised herself as a man and set off for the mountain. Accustomed to riding, she covered many miles daily and reached the dervish on the 20th day. Politely, she asked about the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water. "Madam," the dervish replied, "you seem unaware of the dangers on this quest. It would be best to abandon it and return home." But the princess persisted, seeking to understand the challenges ahead. The dervish recounted the dangers, emphasizing the clamor of voices, the black stones, and the difficulty of the ascent. Yet he acknowledged her determination. "I feel in my heart that I shall succeed," the princess assured him. "Please guide me." The dervish, surprised by her resolve, gave her the ball, and she flung it before her. Princess Parizade plugged her ears with cotton to ignore the voices and started the climb. Despite the increasing noise, she laughed it off, reaching the cage of the talking bird. Seizing the cage, she declared, "Now, my bird, I have caught you, and you shall not escape." As she removed the cotton, the bird spoke, praising her constancy and offering its service. "Tell me where to find the golden water," she requested. The bird directed her, and she filled a flask. Then, inquiring about the singing tree, the bird guided her to it, advising her to plant a twig in her garden. As the princess insisted on finding her brothers among the black stones, the bird hesitated. But when she reminded it of its servitude to her, the bird relented, telling her to use the water from a pitcher to restore them. Following the bird's instructions, she sprinkled the water, and her brothers emerged, saved from their stone fate. Overjoyed, she revealed their purpose on this quest and how she had broken the spell. The princess returned with the 3 wonders promised: the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water. These marvels brought fame to the palace, drawing visitors from afar to witness their splendor. After some days, the princes resumed their usual pursuits of hunting. One day, while hunting alongside the sultan, their skill and courage in the hunt impressed him greatly. He invited them to his palace, where they engaged him in conversations on various subjects, showcasing their learning. The sultan was so impressed that he asked to visit their house, which the princess eagerly prepared for his arrival. Seeking advice from the talking bird, she was instructed to serve a dish of cucumbers stuffed with pearls for the sultan. Confused but trusting the bird's wisdom, the princess followed the instructions and discovered a box of pearls buried in the garden. When the sultan arrived at their home, he was astounded by its beauty and the golden water fountain. The sultan's admiration for the princess and her brothers grew as they showed him their treasures and entertained him. He expressed his desire to return, and the princess, seeking the bird's counsel again, was advised to serve the special dish to the sultan. Thus the princess presented the dish of cucumbers stuffed with pearls to the sultan, who was amazed and delighted. He expressed his admiration for the princess and her brothers, recognizing their worthiness. The princess then led the way from room to room, and the sultan examined everything carefully. "Do you call this a simple country house?" he said at last. "Why, if every country house was like this, the towns would soon be deserted. I am no longer astonished that you do not wish to leave it. Let us go into the gardens, which I am sure are no less beautiful than the rooms." A small door opened straight into the garden, and the first object that met the sultan's eyes was the golden water. "What a splendid fountain!" he exclaimed. "Where does the water come from, and how is the fountain constructed to rise so high? I've never seen anything like it before." He moved forward to examine it closely, and after satisfying his curiosity, the princess led him towards the singing tree. As they approached, the sultan was surprised by the sound of mysterious voices, though he couldn't see anyone. "Where are your musicians hiding?" he inquired of the princess. "Are they in the air or beneath the ground? Such beautiful voices should not remain concealed." "Sire," replied the princess, "the voices emanate from the tree directly in front of us. If you advance a few steps, you'll notice that they become clearer." Following her instructions, the sultan stood in silence, enraptured by the melodious sounds. "Please, madam," he finally spoke, "how did this marvelous tree find its way into your garden? It must have been brought from afar, or else, despite my love for curiosities, I would have heard of it before. What is its name?" "It's known only as the singing tree, sire," she replied, "and it's not indigenous to this land. Its history is intertwined with those of the golden water and the talking bird, which you have yet to see. If your highness desires, I can recount the entire tale once you've rested from your fatigue." "Truly, madam," he responded, "you've shown me such wonders that I cannot feel any fatigue. Let us once more visit the golden water, and I'm eager to lay eyes upon the talking bird." The sultan found it difficult to tear himself away from the golden water, which intrigued him more with each passing moment. "You mentioned," he remarked to the princess, "that this water doesn't flow from any spring, nor is it conveyed through pipes. All I comprehend is that neither it nor the singing tree belongs to this land." "Indeed, sire," replied the princess, "and if you inspect the basin closely, you'll see it's a single piece, hence the water couldn't have been transported through it. What's even more astonishing is that I merely poured a small flaskful into the basin, yet it increased to the quantity you now behold." "Well, I'll refrain from further inspection today," said the sultan. "Take me to the talking bird." Approaching the house, the Sultan noticed a multitude of birds whose songs filled the air. He inquired why they were more abundant here than elsewhere in the garden. "Sire," explained the princess, "do you see that cage hanging in one of the windows of the hall? That's the talking bird, whose voice surpasses them all, even that of the nightingale. The birds congregate here to join their songs with his." Stepping into the room, the Sultan saw the bird cage, but the bird paid no attention, continuing its song uninterrupted. "My slave," the princess addressed the bird, "this is the Sultan. Offer him a gracious greeting." The bird ceased its song instantly, as did all the other birds. "The Sultan is most welcome," it said. "I wish him prosperity and a long life." "I appreciate it, good bird," responded the Sultan, seating himself at a table near the window, where a meal was laid out. "You are truly the Sultan and king of the birds." The Sultan, upon noticing his favorite dish of cucumber, began to serve himself, but was astonished to find that the stuffing consisted of pearls. "This is indeed unusual," he exclaimed, "but I fail to understand the reason behind it. One cannot eat pearls." "Sire," interjected the bird before anyone else could speak, "surely you can't be so surprised by a cucumber stuffed with pearls, when you readily believed that the Sultana gave birth to a dog, a cat, and a log of wood instead of children." "I believed it," admitted the Sultan, "because her attendants told me so." "The attendants, sire," explained the bird, "were the Sultana's sisters, consumed with jealousy over the honor bestowed upon her. To exact revenge, they concocted this tale. Examine them, and they will confess their deceit. These are your children, saved from death by the gardener of your estate, and raised as his own." Instantly, the truth dawned on the Sultan. "Bird," he exclaimed, "my heart tells me you speak the truth. My children," he continued, "let me embrace you, not only as siblings, but as the heirs to the royal blood of Persia." After the initial outpouring of emotion, the Sultan quickly finished his meal. Turning to his children, he declared, "Today you have reunited with your father. Tomorrow I will bring your mother, the Sultana, to meet you. Be prepared to welcome her." The Sultan mounted his horse and returned swiftly to the capital. Without delay, he summoned the Grand Vizier and ordered the immediate interrogation of the Sultana's sisters. They were swiftly tried and found guilty, meeting their fate within the hour. The Sultan wasted no time and, accompanied by his entire court, went to the great mosque, personally liberating the Sultana from her prolonged imprisonment. "Madam," he cried, embracing her with tears in his eyes, "I come to seek your forgiveness for the injustices done to you. I have already initiated the punishment of those responsible for this abominable crime, and I hope you'll pardon me when I introduce you to our children, the most charming and accomplished individuals in the world. Join me, reclaim your position, and receive the honor you deserve." This declaration was made before a vast gathering of people, drawn from all corners upon hearing the news. The word spread rapidly among them. The next morning, adorned in regal attire and followed by the entire court, the Sultan and Sultana journeyed to the country residence of their children. Here, the Sultan presented each child to the Sultana individually, resulting in an emotional reunion filled with embraces, tears, and loving words. Following a sumptuous dinner prepared for the occasion, they ventured into the garden, where the Sultan proudly showcased the golden water and the singing tree to his wife. The talking bird, however, had already made the acquaintance of the Sultana. As night fell, they rode back to the capital together, the princes on either side of their father and the princess with her mother. The way was lined with people, their welcoming cheers mingling with the songs of the talking bird, perched on the princess's lap, and those of the other birds that followed. Thus they returned triumphantly to the Sultan's palace, united as a family once more.